I've always been a hard worker. That's me late at night Googling.
Thinking through how you show up and how people receive you.
I show up in the same way that I always have. You're becoming conditioned to be cruel. Do you agree? It's just a really troubling thing.
I don't know.
But do you think there's a way to harness social media and being a boss?
Yes. Just me standing up for what's right.
The whole place lit up.
Too often, celebrities do interviews and speeches under the guise of wanting what's best for the common good, when in reality it's all about them, saying things to advance their career and also remove obstacles. Today, companies allow interviews to be part of the celebrity's self-branding. There's nothing journalistic about them. This interview unintentionally exposes some of the tactics Meghan uses to distract from or conceal what she's really talking about. It also exposes that Meghan might not be the open-minded freedom fighter she brands herself as. What are the effects and consequences of Meghan's rhetoric that's shared by so many celebrities today? Let's find out. This interview took place after Meghan and Harry had escaped to California, facing massive on- and offline criticism. This is important to know in order to understand Meghan's agenda. How does Meghan's rhetoric come across as generalizing, divisive, and self-serving?
Melody, I want to talk to you about something that you wrote. And you said, why is it so hard for people to talk about money? And you talked about how when you were a child, you said, as a child, I was desperate to understand money, not to make it, but to master it.
Yes, I absolutely wrote that because I felt that this is one of these issues that is this idea of financial literacy, and our unwillingness to speak about money is causing us to actually widen the gaps that exist in our society. But even the closest of friends won't sit together and speak about money issues. And I think that at the end of the day has dramatic repercussions for our society, particularly women and minorities in our society.
Melody's answer emphasizes people, us, and our. Linguistically, this makes what she says relevant to everyone. It's only at the end that Melody mentions women specifically. In Meghan's following Turner talk, this demographic is the sole focus as opposed to just being an add-on. This creates a big difference in how Melody and Meghan come across. Let's watch.
It's a really good point. I mean, to that, they did a study that said 61% of women would rather talk about the details of their own death than talk about money. And you look at that and go, how have we culturally allowed that to be the case? There's nothing wrong with talking about a woman's success or her ambition or her financial prowess. I mean, Melody, we've talked about this before. It's a really interesting one. You think, why is it culturally we are equipping girls and women to think that if you are ambitious, there's something negative about that? Whereas if a boy is described that way, or if a man certainly is described as ambitious, that's an incredibly positive thing culturally. But I don't know how we end up changing that. But I think, Melody, would you agree? It's just a really troubling thing.
It's interesting to note that despite Meghan saying it's a good point, she only focuses on Melody's add-on. She only focuses on one demographic, which can be seen as quite exclusive for someone who values inclusivity so much.
We sat down with a few of you delegates, and it was incredibly inspiring, the resounding themes that came up about representation, about inclusion.
Meghan focuses on what's useful for her agenda, and what's her agenda to come up with excuses and wishful thinking as to why the world hasn't embraced her the way she had planned. From Meghan's underappreciated podcast, we know that ambition is a go-to word. She says she didn't feel the negative connotation behind the word until she started dating her now husband. That's Harry, I'm guessing. Thus, it's no coincidence that Meghan uses the word in this interview as well. She uses it as if she speaks for all women. But knowing what we know from the podcast and what's about to be revealed in this interview, we can deduce that she's actually talking about herself, speaking for herself. Also, Melody didn't even mention the word ambition. Meghan introduced that word in her elaboration on Melody's answer. An elaboration that has little to do with the essence of what Melody said. Another aspect of Meghan's agenda is to presuppose resistance without proving it. No one said that it's wrong for anyone to talk about success and ambition, and certainly not that it's a cultural matter in this day and age. However, repeating something excessively doesn't make it true.
How have we why is it culturally, that's an incredibly positive thing culturally, but
the way Meghan influences Melody's answer is worth noting.
I mean, Melody, we've talked about this before, but I think, Melody, would you agree? It's just a really troubling thing.
The utterances.
Melody, would you agree? It's just a really troubling thing.
Have a strong preference for agreement and make disagreement hard or uncomfortable for Melody. As a result of this influence, Melody then elaborates on the narrower focus that Meghan emphasized.
Also, I like definitions. The definition of ambition, in earnest pursuit of achievement. Earnest meaning serious. Why is that wrong? Why is pursuing achievement, whatever it might be, something that is negative? And why is it more negative for women than men?
Even though both of them have yet to substantiate this claim, Melody is able to point to things she can improve on. Unlike Meghan, whose answer was only about indignation or pretend indignation and playing on other women's indignation.
I have found myself having at times to modulate myself in order to win. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Sometimes I can be too big, and in being too big, someone can't hear me. So I have to figure out a way to connect with them so that they can hear me, not be intimidated, be non-threatening and not threatened at the same time. And finding that edge can be very, very hard, but it can mean thinking through how you show up and how people receive you.
Meghan's follow-up to this speaks volumes about the difference between her and Melody in terms of self-awareness.
How do you deal with that? Oftentimes you walk in here and it's like you're bigger than life just walking in.
Is that how you felt just now?
Yes.
No,
I mean, the whole place lit up. Absolutely.
That's why. Well, we don't get out much, so I don't personally feel that way. I still see myself as the same that I've always been. Right. I've always been a hard worker. I have always, the people that know me well, and some of them are here today, I've just always been the same. And so I think Melody's point is a really strong one in that the perception might be different, but if you are really grounded in who you are, and your ethics and your values, and I don't know, I show up in the same way that I always have.
This answer is fascinating for unintended reasons. First of all, the interviewer, so-called cheerleader, seems more appropriate, is strangely nervous and overcompensating. Secondly, unlike Melody, Meghan shows no ability and or desire to point out things she's aware of doing or not doing. On the contrary, she sees this as an opportunity to praise herself as a hard worker with strong ethics and values. I wonder what that leaves Melody in Meghan's eyes, since she was able to mention quite a few things. Thirdly, with the conjunction but, which initiates a contrast, she downplays Melody's point to instead emphasize the importance in being grounded in who you are.
I think Melody's point is a really strong one in that the perception might be different, but
which, unsurprisingly, is more self-praise. So, does she actually think that Melody's point is a strong one? Looking at how she phrases this, it's very unlikely. Meghan makes it sound like perception isn't relevant to her. However, the way she talks about controlling important aspects of online negativity tells a different story. A story about how the only perception she wants is the kind that favors her. Controlling online culture is something that Meghan and her spare have reiterated in other interviews. Let's hear what she says in this interview first.
It's about creating the news rather than reporting the news, but the damaging effects of that, specifically for women, especially for young girls, is impossible to even quantify.
What specifically does Meghan have in mind? The fact that she doesn't give examples is very telling. This isn't about the concern she has for a certain demographic. This is about the concern she has for herself and the backlash she's faced for being ambitious, which is wishful thinking. Last time I checked, lots of women have ambitions, and they don't face any backlash for it, rightfully so. Also, should news only be reported? What about opinion journalism then? Opinion journalism creates the news. What kind of news does Meghan want? We haven't seen anything yet.
Melody.
But it can be harnessed for good. It can be harnessed in the other way.
Well, and also to
stories are powerful.
Well, but also to be able on those platforms to have some way where you are incentivized to promote things, as you're saying, Melody, that are positive and good and true.
Under the guise of speaking for all women, Meghan's emphasis on true speaks to the articles and videos that have been written and made about her and the world's most famous spare.
To see this institutional gaslighting, they were happy to lie to protect my brother. They were never willing to tell the truth to protect us.
Positive and good and true.
Positive and good? According to whom? According to which definition? Meghan's. This is subjective language because when you analyze what's going on around the world, it's not going to be all positive, far from it. With Meghan's recommendation, people could get away with all sorts of things without being called out for it, because we wouldn't want to do anything negative. So no, Meghan can't assume agreement.
Positive and good and true, right?
Even if she only has positive things to say.
Did you make Kate cry?
No, the reverse happened. A few days before the wedding, she was upset about something. It made me cry, and it really hurt my feelings.
Okay.
And I've forgiven her, right? Mm-hmm. Right?
Next, Meghan reveals that she doesn't exactly think highly of the average internet user.
Then without question, you are perpetuating a cycle, especially in the entire period of lockdown, right? In lockdown, let's say someone before that had, 5 hours a week that they could invest in just scrolling online. During lockdown and the absence of being out of the house or being at work, maybe you're spending 50 hours online. You're becoming indoctrinated. You're becoming conditioned to be cruel.
Yes, because we can't have people freely scrolling online. What if they happen to stumble upon content that doesn't praise this authentic and organic duo? It doesn't sound like Meghan has a problem with the indoctrination part, but that she wants to control what people are being indoctrinated with. Meghan and Harry's so-called mental health summit emphasized this in the worst way possible.
But again, as the dads up here said, well, it's all about the bottom line. Right. But if the shareholders of these companies can accept that they're going to get a little less profit out of it to make it a safe space, then that would stop the suffering.
What profit and what content? And how will less profit automatically stop the suffering online? What suffering and to whom? This is as deliberately vague as it gets. Also, a safe space doesn't look the same for everyone. What Harry calls a safe space might be a quite scary place for someone who doesn't believe in censorship or the term safe space.
Tristan had said, just like when something is invented, let's take the car, for example. When the car was first invented, there wasn't a seatbelt. You could smoke inside of your car. And what happened? People started to get hurt. So you started to change the car. You would put in safeguards so that this new piece of something that is part of our evolution is adapting to keep people safe, right? Now, even if you're veering off into the lane, maybe you're getting a little sleepy, you have to beep, 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 bring you right back to where you're safe. And so as we watch the evolution of social media and the internet, what are those same modifications we need to make?
That's not the same at all. In car accidents, the risks are the same for all people, and thus all people have the same need for the same kind of safety. Online, we're not all at risk because we don't react the same to the same kind of content. But these are the kinds of generalizations that celebrities and politicians who think about people as groups rather than as individuals inevitably make. So when people get hurt by something, we should ban the content. Is that it? Good luck agreeing with people about what constitutes hurtful content. Not to mention developing technology that's able to predict exactly what will hurt someone and how. Also, you can't shelter anyone from reality. All people will inevitably stumble upon content that hurts them, no matter how many safe spaces you make. The duo's intentional lack of specificity is exposed when Harry's asked a specific question.
What does a healthy social media environment look like to you in the future when you think about this work that your foundation is doing?
To be honest, I don't know. As a dad, I don't know. As a human, I'm not sure. I think social media is going to evolve in different shapes and sizes as time goes on.
So even though this event is supposedly about solutions to young people's online-related mental health issues, you can't say what a healthy social media environment looks like. How are they going to find solutions when they don't even know what their own foundation is working towards? However, that doesn't stop Meghan from calling this a high-level conversation.
And the more information we have, the more information gathering we're able to do, the more we can have these high-level conversations and try to move the needle a little bit.
The thing about conversations, though, is that they have to be about something in order for them to have any impact. The overall impression from Meghan and Harry's statements is that a certain form of censorship is needed, and next, Meghan addresses this between the lines.
And there has to be responsibility that lands somewhere, and that must be with the platforms, with some, that's a much larger conversation, but it's really...
Yes, that is indeed a much larger conversation, So we're fortunate to have their specific plans so we can start changing things.
I don't know.
And there has to be responsibility that lands somewhere.
Responsibility? Yes, because Meghan and Harry shouldn't be the ones taking responsibility for, I don't know, the many interviews they freely participated in. Interviews that expose a prominent sense of entitlement, an entitlement you aren't allowed to point out because that's negative.
But even down to like the national anthem. No one thought to say, "Oh, you're American. You're not going to know that. That's me late at night Googling what's the national. I've got to learn this."
Meghan and Harry have financial interests in keeping their narrative alive, using the very same platforms they can't stop criticizing. When it's positive attention, these platforms are good. When it's negative, they're bad. But that's the thing. We don't live in a world with only positive news. We live in a world where duchesses complain about having at least 2 years to Google the lyrics to a song and only expect sympathetic reactions. If you're not sympathetic, you're against their ambitions.
But do you think there's a way to harness social media in some way to actually help with these issues we're talking about now in terms of this issue of parity and some of the issues that you've been talking about, whether it be paid family leave or anything else?
What a euphemism like harness actually hints at is censoring certain comments, certain opinions about ordinary political issues. That's pretty serious and is similar to what a certain BBC journalist said.
Particularly around hate speech in the company. Is that
what hate speech are you talking about?
I would see more hateful content in that.
Content you don't like or hateful? What do you mean to describe a hateful thing?
Yeah, I mean, just content that will solicit a reaction, something that may include something that is slightly racist or slightly sexist, those kinds of things.
Slightly, he says, deliberately widening what could be deemed offensive and subject to be removed. Who is indeed the arbiter of what content should be harnessed? People like Meghan. It appears so, because next she goes on to talk about strong changes, mimicking the interviewer's verb, harness.
I think that there are ways to make strong changes on social media platforms and with the media in general, but people have to be brave enough to do it. In terms of parity, I think, right now the demonization that you're talking about for women if they're being called ambitious.
The demonization they still haven't substantiated, but let's not let a detail like that get in the way of this important conversation. Not only social media platforms, but also media in general. Yes, it totally sounds like Meghan wants what's best for the common good, and not just for her and her now husband.
But people have to be brave enough to do it.
That doesn't sound manipulative at all. Melody isn't much better when it comes to controlling equality. Talk about an oxymoron.
That you don't believe necessarily in quotas, but you believe in targets. What do you mean by that?
Targets are very common in corporate America. We have earnings targets. We have profitability targets. There's a range. We know that if we give guidance in corporate America, we don't get it usually to the penny. We say we'll make between this and this. We need those same kind of targets around diversity. I think those goals should be related to the overall demographics of our society.
In order to sell her idea, she uses the positive word target rather than the word quota that she knows people would consider to be negative. But the meaning's the same. She and like-minded people control what the diversity should look like, which not only undermines equal opportunities, but also the word diversity itself. Diversity means diversity of thought first and foremost, and people who look the same and are born with the same innate characteristics don't necessarily think and want the same. Diversity of thought doesn't focus on people's outer characteristics, but their inner characteristics, their personalities and talents. Even though she makes it sound nicer than Meghan, what Melody's proposing here isn't any different from Captain Marvel's logically inconsistent suggestions.
That 67% of the top critics reviewing the 100 highest grossing movies were white males. This is a huge disconnect from the US population breakdown.
It's logically inconsistent because people like Melody and Bree don't apply this principle in all areas, but only areas that involve money and status. What about carpenters? Shouldn't we have equal representation of carpenters as well? As if what people are able to bring to the table is dependent on what they look like and what they were born as. Very postmodern, surface-level thinking.
One of the things that seems like such an easy solve from my lens, and we talked to some friends about this as well, you look at Instagram, for example, there's a like button or there's comments. So you have to, if you disagree with it, comment in a really vitriolic way. As opposed to if there was just a dislike button, wouldn't that hugely shift what you were putting out there? Because you could just like it or dislike it. Now, you either like it or you have to say something negative.
What's interesting about this is that Meghan doesn't reflect on what makes people comment negatively. She doesn't point the finger at the people who say things that make people react, and she couldn't dream of pointing the finger at herself. However, saying that certain comments are negative doesn't negate the potential truth value of these comments. Negativity is important for criticism and to speak truth to power. But Meghan doesn't want comments. No one says that you have to comment in a
vitriolic way.
That's Meghan's interpretation of the negative comments coming her way.
And it's just adding to this really unfortunate cycle that is that I think is having a ripple effect on women across the board.
Meghan keeps acting like she's speaking on behalf of a collective. It speaks volumes about modern journalism, so-called, that she gets away with this without a hint of critical counter-questions. But I guess this is Meghan's definition of positive journalism, positive reporting. The kind that favors her and like-minded celebrities and negates critical thought and unites the world in senseless cheering.
Being a boss.
Yes.
I've read great things about you as a boss, and if you read the tabloids, you can read all sorts of crazy things about it being a boss. Do you feel like you have to do it differently? And do you, specifically given your role, do you feel like you have to do it differently?
Well, firstly, I would urge you not to read tabloids because I don't think that's healthy for anyone. Hopefully one day they come with a warning label like cigarettes do, like this is toxic for your mental health.
But wait, that sounds like a negative comment. I thought we weren't supposed to encourage negativity. And what would be better for people's mental health to read positive-only articles that couldn't stand scrutiny? The statement is very telling in terms of Meghan's view of not only the press, but also freedom of thought. While it's true that gossip and certain types of name-calling are always wrong, criticizing opinions and arguments is fundamental to a free society. Also, there's much irony in the fact that Meghan and the Spare spend so much time talking about the press that they've made a fortune on complaining about. Without the press, no millions of dollars. However, Meghan and the interviewer don't reflect on any of that, because positive-only interviews are only about advertising, and the next clip is no exception. We're about to hear a powerful statement.
There is, the Daily Mail, as you know, in the UK, appealing this ruling that was in your favor about this letter that they had published that you had sent to your father.
Correct. I won the case, and this issue, frankly, has been going on when I had no children at all. Melody, I now have 2 children, as you know, so it's an arduous process, but again, it's just me standing up for what's right, which I think is important across the board, be it in this case or in the other things we've been talking about today. At a certain point, no matter how difficult it is, if you know the difference between right and wrong, you must stand up for what's right, and that's what I'm doing.
Really? You know the difference between right and wrong? With you know, Meghan makes a generalization which presupposes that people agree with her definition of right and wrong. She presupposes agreement about the political and ideological issues she allegedly advocates for. So right means making strong changes to social media and media in general, carried out by people who think like Meghan. How's that for a safe space? Now we know what Meghan's really standing up for. Also, can we meaningfully talk about right and wrong this way, in a world full of people who no longer acknowledge objective truth or pretend not to acknowledge it for money and status?
Some children figure out their gender really early.
In truth, okay?
Whose truth are we talking about?
Gentlemen. Gentle them. And yes, I am giving major side-eye to anyone that thinks differently.
Meghan presupposes a lot, and the interviewer doesn't ask her to define her presuppositions or prove them. On the contrary, he's Meghan's biggest cheerleader. Ironically, this interview is proof that a critical press and critical commentaries are needed. Because if a positive-only mentality wins, celebrities and politicians will be able to control the agenda with emotional and logically inconsistent arguments. That's it for now. Feel free to like and subscribe. Have a nice day.